Welcome back to another episode of Simon Says. So in our last episode, we talked about self-determination. Just a little bit of preview to that. So one of the very interesting thing, because when we talk about federal versus state, one of the very thing that really comes into the mind is self-determination. But what really is that concept of self-determination? So as a Sarawakian, naturally, you will look at some of the things that have gone into the land. So what are the seeds of self-determination that is in the land, that is available for us to just tap into? So then that's when I saw this constitution, the 9 cardinal principles that is actually written in 1941 Constitution of Sarawak. So one of the things is that the goal of self-government shall always be kept in mind, and that the people of Sarawak shall be entrusted in due course with the governance of themselves, and that continual efforts shall be made to hasten the reaching of this goal by educating them in the obligation, responsibilities, and the privileges of citizenship. So I thought that was really, really interesting, because that has always been the context in which the first people of Sarawak has been educated and has been taught, and just before Sarawak reached quote-unquote independence, before joining Malaysia. And we really just see that there has always been this seed of self-determination, or if you will, self-government, that has been basically taught to them.
Yeah, it just kind of remind me of James Brooke, the White Raja, who sort of obtained the entire land from the Sultanate of Brunei. And when he wrote back to... Now, by the way, he was born in India. He wasn't even born in Britain, but he had family in England. And when he wrote back, he used the word self-determination and self-government also. And it's almost like... And because he doesn't have children, and later on it was passed to his brother, then a cousin, etc., I always felt like James wanted the whole administration to be run on a trustee basis or steward basis. If you watch Lord of the Ring, the king was gone for I don't know how many thousand years, but you have the steward.
Yep.
And that with that kind of mindset, you need self-determination.
Yep.
And it's not a coincidence, right, that self-determination was the word used by, S4S, Sarawakian for Sarawak. Sarawak for Sarawakians, the movement, which, by the way, it predates Malaysia. Some people thought, it is the new thing. No, it predates that. Now, of course, a lot of them were from SUPP then. But, of course, self-determination has so many elements. But I guess today, for the short presentation, we are using the Sarawak model to kind of describe, because I think the content, the explanation will be similar, right?
Yep. So would you think that this is a concept that is very similar to Malaysian Malaysia, or like in this context, Sarawak for Sarawakians?
Yeah, definitely, because for all the viewers and listeners, that's Lee Kuan Yew's slogan, right? And that was the thing that he told Sarawak and Sabah, so that they became sold with the idea of joining Malaysia. And of course, when we study history, Lee Kuan Yew basically wanted balance, because Malaya, of course, have more Malay, obviously. Then Sabah and Sarawak have more non-Malay, and you can balance out as a nation. I think that was probably his intention. And I mean, we don't want to talk about his personal ambition to be the ultimate kingmaker, right? But he wanted that, and I think the slogan Malaysia really resonate, right? Because it's like, hey, I have a role, I have an opportunity to shape my land and my country. And I think that's maybe how he got the Sarawak people to enough Sarawakian leaders to come on board.
I think that is also one of the propaganda and also sentiment that was felt during this GE 15. Basically, it's like we don't put certain people's right above another people group. Then after that, you basically just push for what's best for Malaysia first. Almost like what's the famous quote? Ask not what your country can
JF
do for
Kennedy.
you. Yeah. So I think it's really going back to that principle of basically people just see what they contribute to the table.
It's very interesting you mentioned about G15, because it's almost like a reversal of the state elections in terms of the voting pattern.
Yep.
In terms of now, of course, to be fair, the the whole Sarawak independence discussion is not so much a federal discussion, and a lot of people recognize that, and they think of it in terms of, look, we don't want another Perikatan Nasional, we don't want a Sabri, we don't want UMNO. So because of that, so people can kind of differentiate the two worlds, I guess.
Yep.
And of course, the recent analysis of Sarawak voters was there was a huge swing to Pakatan Harapan from Sarawak, from the native, which was quite interesting. And now of course, I think that the pro-independence will always struggle in a federal fight because it's not really their arena, you know. So then of course, restrictions was taken off and things like that in terms of travel. So a bit hard to make a final analysis, but I do agree with you that people kind of think of the bigger picture and let's just rally around so that we don't get another banana government. I don't know what's the right word to use.
I guess people are fed up with identity politics as well. But then also that really goes back to, who do we identify ourselves as? Do we identify ourselves first as a Malaysian, or do we identify ourselves as Chinese or certain other people group?
Now, Lara, of course, you know me that, you know, even though we know, we heard the arguments, and we also consider, look, it is a possibility of independence and things like that. But one of the reasons I myself, and I believe you are also in a similar camp, we are not so enthusiastic about the whole thing, was because we believe that the self-determinations of the Sarawak people will help the whole federation.
Yep.
It will help to balance all the racial, religious rhetoric that has been happening, and together we can become a greater rainbow nation. So that's one argument. Now, I totally understand when people say, look, well, we were cheated into Malaysia, and now we want out.
We want reparations.
Reparation, and I mean, that's another huge topic. And I think there is validity, but then we have one issue here. It's like husband and wife. You know, I use this analogy. I don't know if people will be offended by it. And it's like somebody said, I've been cheated into the relationship for whatever reason, but then continue in a relationship for 40, 50 years. So I'm not saying that the cheating was not right or not real, but I'm saying that those 40, 50 years has impact over the overall discussions and remedy. It's not as easy as you say, okay, cheated, let's move out now. What happens to the 9 children? What happens to all the asset we have over the years? It's not so straightforward. You know what I mean?
Yep. I think one of the concepts that was missing in discussion concerning self-determination is the accountability of all our actions, because every action has consequences. So how the previous generation, how they voted for the current government, I mean, because like what you say, this whole concept of Sarawak for Sarawakians predates independence. So that concept has always been there. It's just that, but true and true, you have been in bed with big government. You just like the whole idea of having a huge power that is vested in the federal government. So how can you then, after that, like so many years later on, then you say, no, actually, we don't like it. Actually, we were being cheated. Actually, so it looks to me like you're just transferring a centralized power from the federal all to the hands of Sarawakian government. And I'm not sure if I really like the current Sarawak state government.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get also when we're talking about feeling and impression here, right? You know, when they talk about, look, you know, why do we want independence? Is because there's so much money there that's being kept, that's being held by the federal government. There's so much resources that's being monopolized by Petronas. We want it for ourselves. All valid and legitimate discussions. But the impression I get for at least for people who are pushing for this is that transfer the power to us. We can be better trustee, which they may be better, but in terms of the discussion of big versus small government, it's like you're transferring, like you say, just transfer to another big government. But whereas if we truly understand the concept that James Brooke talked about, self-determination, self-government, I think there has to be some sort of power back to the people. And that's why I think this might be a right time for me to just read. You know, this is a remark made by SUPP ex-chairman Ong Kee Hui on the day Singapore left Malaysia. Now, we talk about this in season 2, the days of future past. 9th of August 1965. And the speech was made in Sarawak Parliament, okay? And, he said many things, talk about the London Agreement and say, look, London Agreement is a negotiated agreement, Malaya, Singapore, we know that. So basically, he's trying to say, look, we have a right to leave. Now, let me just begin the quote, okay? The last part, he say, quote, have we no right to be consulted? Because they were not told that Singapore was leaving. The future of all territories which were colonial territories must be decided by self-determination. See, this is not a word foreign to them. In this case, it is arguable whether in the first place the people agree wholeheartedly to the arrangement. You see, they're going back to the whole discussion. We never agree to join Malaysia. And of course, there are a lot of incidental evidence, but it seems that the record are not really there. Did they do a referendum? I remember in the same gathering, they were trying to push Kowloon Lingkam to do a referendum. And he was agreeable, but then the next thing, we don't know what happened, and emergency came to Malaysia. Were they, did someone put a pistol on their head and just say, submit or die? I don't know. It seems like that. Why is it so silent? And then, it's like you want to push it back to the people. I would therefore urge the government to think seriously of the step which it has now taken by starting what the honourable member has very correctly stated to be the beginning of the process of disintegration of Malaysia. End of quote. So I think the spirit behind this fiery speech was correct. It's like, if we ever want to decide on the fate, in terms of living, the Constitution, by the way, is silent on succession. And we know America went through a civil war to decide this issue. So what's your view? If a state, now of course some people argue only the original participant can leave. So that means Malaya, Singapore already left, Sabah, Sarawak. But what's your view in terms of the process? If we use self-determination, that means I think referendum is the most, it's the most transparent and legitimate method.
Well, but that's sort of going back to like Scotland, right? Leaving UK.
Yeah, they had it and they didn't vote to leave.
Yeah, so I think it's not as straightforward. Yes, referendum might be a good way forward in terms of just see what are the people thinking of this whole idea of leaving Malaysia.
Now, by the way, let me just interject briefly. The whole idea of referendum, it actually has a few safeguards, okay? First, the government must agree to referendum. So that means the first level of safeguard is the state government.
Yep.
The voters chose the state government. So it could be, for example, David Cameron promised a Brexit referendum, and when he won so easily, he had no choice but to, he thought he was losing, that general election. And he won, and he reluctantly did it, and they chose leave. So it's like, so you have one safeguard. Then the second safeguard is the actual referendum. So it's not something to be taken very lightly, but you have a few stages you want to go through. But we are not even given that opportunity. We have not even changed the state government, not even one time. So do you think that is a prerequisite before people can even decide what level of self-determination they want?
Yeah, of course, you test it by the law. You test it by the available avenue that there is.
So win election first.
Yes. You have to show that you have a certain amount of approval, if you will, from the people.
Yep.
That right that is being given from the people, that they say, yes, we are ready for this path of self-government. We are ready for more obligation. We are ready for more responsibilities. So, but I think people don't really understand the whole implication, just like how Brexit, they have to negotiate for so long in terms of the economic obligation and how is it going to be like, how the traveling is going to be like. There are a lot of things that have to go into the thoughts.
And it's not as straightforward as, look, if we decided to leave, we take back all the petroleum, what happened to all the laws that have been drafted that gave away the rights? How do you even reverse that? So that's why it has to be. Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I would say you have to have a government that wants to consider this, then a referendum, and then a negotiated exit. Now, of course, the pro-independence one, they put down many options, but one of the options they are really passionate about is unilateral declaration of independence. Now, why they say it can be done? Because they say Singapore did it. But by the way, do you know that Lee Kuan Yew had a special cabinet meeting? The whole minutes was classified. And then I don't know how many years after he died, it was declassified. And he said, look, the unilateral declaration was negotiated for almost 1 year with Malaya. And basically, the final decision was, you declare and we let you leave. That, to me, is not unilateral declaration. That is a negotiated exit that saves face for everyone.
Yep.
Now, I know some people will say, oh, that's not the legal position. Well, people can argue what you want, but I'm just saying that, look, it's not so easy to just say we want out unless you have a few aircraft carrier backing you up and you are prepared to fight.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because is the whole state, is the whole region ready for war, I mean, what if it comes to physical war?
Yeah, I don't think we are. But at the same time, I feel like the spirit of self-determination has been fanned. And now we talk about general election, state election, 5 years, vote 2 times, and even people find that too tedious. And now, of course, with those of us working here, flying back to East Malaysia, it's costly, it's time consuming. A lot of people cannot do it. We understand. But what do you think of local election? Maybe that's a stepping stone for people to discover whether they even like the idea of self-determination. I mean, it's easy to say you like, but when you have to be responsible for many actions, are you going to be so passionate?
But I guess it really comes to, there has to have a time whereby people will really just be accountable for their actions. And it really starts from local election, because where else are you going to start from? I mean, you're not happy with the condition of the infrastructure in your state, in your district, you find your local councils. And then what will make it very, very powerful is that you vote these people in.
Yep.
I mean, they are answerable to the voters. Just like how we have it in state election, we have it in federal election. So why can't we have a local election? That's my view.
Yeah, we should definitely have it, because that will really... But I mean, just to digress a little bit, why no local election is because whoever is in power, regardless of whether you're Pakatan, Barisan Nasional or Pakatan, I think they're just afraid to lose power. Selangor, after 10 years of taking over the state government, refused to have local election. Now, of course, they will say, oh, it requires an amendment at the constitutional level, and which is true, but even now, there's no effort. And of course, they can say, oh, we're in a unity government, our hands are tied, and things like that. But I felt like if the political leaders, especially from Sabah and Sarawak, are genuine, now the reason I frame it like this is because I feel they are not genuine. In wanting independence, they should push for local election. And GPS is really at the strongest bargaining power ever in terms of forcing agenda. But they're not going to do that because I think they know they might be rejected. But ironically, I would say GPS has done a relatively good job in local election. I mean, would say that the council run by them historically has been quite efficient, and they make things profitable, and they don't require a lot of injection from state government. So I mean, you have done well. Why not? Took a gamble and see people will choose you or not. But of course, they are very afraid of playing out at a fair level, even level kind of competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think our time is almost up, but let's talk one thing about self-determination, and then maybe that will lead to future topic, okay? Now, you were mentioning, self-determination. Is it similar to the MAGA movement?
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering, because the concept of self-determination, self-governance, it really requires you to just basically get your hands dirty.
Yep.
I mean, not the government. I mean, not the elected officials only. I mean, but literally the people that has to Right, really just get the hands dirty and really just be ready to fight like whichever things, like the things that you don't like education, transgenderism, like all these sort of things, drag queens in the States, then you have to like go in and basically do your job.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I find that, in the United States, so many things are out for election, even school board and even district attorney and things like that. And I mean, of course, the big news today we're recording is that President Trump has been indicted, right? And now this is related to this because on one hand, yes, the district attorney are voted in, their campaign and things like that. American system has the most check and balance. But you see, all the check and balance in the world is going to be irrelevant if you don't put people who will respect the rule of law. So that's still the thing. But still, you have a system, it is good. And, you talk about education because I think some of our listeners and audience might not be familiar with the American system. The school districts, they have board and you can actually put in, if you want to change certain educational policies or all the things that are happening with the transgender, with all the very aggressive open sex kind of agenda. So some parents had enough and they went for election, became the board and stopped the policy.
Yep.
I think that's a great picture of self-determination. And I think since we're talking about MAGA, and MAGA is always linked with populism, right? And it's interesting that I've been reading some article in Malaysia, you think about populism, they will say like PSM is populism.
Well.
Yeah. So we have different definition, interpretation. But here's the thing we want to end with. We're not going to answer, but it's going to be one of our future episodes. Is populism the same as welfare state? Maybe you want to give one or two comments, or you want to save it for next episode?
No, I think when it comes to welfare state, I can't help but really just think of deep state. I mean, seriously, there's that sort of linking that somehow just like my brain.
So it's like because
equals deep
you do
state.
welfare, so people become dependent on you, then you can control them.
Yeah. I think like what we have done in the political compass episode, whereby do you how much intervention do you want your government to put into your lives? But also the fact that with more power, I think there's just that opportunity for deep state to really just run rampant. And then you're just giving all your rights away to them. Because it's like in exchange of all these benefits that you're getting, you are exchanging away something else because it is a transaction.
But what do you say to people who say, look, populism is basically like protectionism?
Yeah, I would say somewhat, yes.
So you would differentiate that from welfare because it's different kind of governmental intervention.
Yeah, I would say you are defending your individual rights of freedom. You are defending your borders. So all these things, I don't think it goes against the fact that you need a government to control. But how big is the government or how small is the government to run all these things efficiently?
And you can definitely differentiate that from welfare because welfare is just hand out, and more hand out. Okay, that will be an interesting discussion, but a preview for you. We're going to talk about, populism versus welfare state. I don't know, maybe in the next few weeks to come.
Yep.
All right, so that's all the time we have for today. So that's it for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.